Alright, hi guys, my name is Alexus and I am a third year PhD student in Biological Oceanography at University of Hawai'i at Mānoa. And this is the first video in our How to Get Into and Apply to Grad School series. In today's video, I'll be going over what exactly is graduate school, the differences between a master's and a PhD, how do you know if graduate school is for you, and where exactly should you begin. And before we get started, I just wanted to quickly mention that this video is going to be more specific to applying to graduate school in the natural sciences, because that's what I have experience in. The process might be a little bit different if you're applying to mathematics, physics, engineering, or humanities. Alright, so first things first, what is graduate school? In graduate school, you are training to become an expert in your specific field or discipline. And unlike undergrad, you're going to be contributing new information to the field, new knowledge, and you can think of this more as an apprenticeship rather than traditional schooling. Alright, so as a graduate student, you're going to be working on an independent research project, which will culminate in a thesis or dissertation, which you will have to defend in the end. This means that you'll be diving into the scientific literature, reading broadly and deeply in your specific topic or discipline. You'll also be designing an entire research project on your own. This means you'll have to do the reading, brainstorm which questions you think are interesting and worth pursuing that you are specifically interested in. You'll have to identify research gaps that you want to pursue, come up with the methods that can answer those research questions, develop a research plan, so like which experiments you'll be doing, which data will you be collecting. You'll go do the lab work, do the field work, the data collection. Then once you have all of these data, you'll get into the analysis, so like coding and computer work to analyze your results. After the data analysis, you'll be writing up all of your results and discussion. You'll be publishing manuscripts as well as writing and defending your thesis and or dissertation. And once you've done all of this writing, you'll probably do a good amount of presenting and sharing your research with the community. Graduate students are also taking a number of classes or coursework specifically in your first 1 to 2 years of your program, and this also varies depending on which program you're going into. You can also get involved in teaching, mentoring, and education and outreach. Alright, so now that I've talked about graduate school a little bit, I wanted to introduce the two main types of degrees that you can get in graduate school, and this is going to be your master's and your PhD. The main differences are that a master's is much shorter than a PhD, so it's going to be anywhere from 2 to 3 years, whereas a PhD can be 5 to 7 years. In a master's program, you can take anywhere from 8 to 10 graduate level courses, whereas in a PhD, you might have a little bit more courses, maybe 8 to 12. Not very different, but if you are getting your PhD after your coursework, you will have to pass your comprehensive exam. In a master's program, you're going to be writing and defending your thesis, which in oceanography is equivalent to 1 to 2 peer-reviewed papers. And in your PhD, you're going to be writing and defending your dissertation, which in oceanography is equivalent to 3 or more peer-reviewed papers, but all with a common theme. So you can think of it as like 3 separate chapters or 3 separate projects, but they should all relate in some way. So before applying to graduate school, you're going to want to ask yourself, is graduate school for me? And some questions that you should ask yourself when you're considering this is, what is your ideal profession or long-term career goal? And do you actually need a master's or a PhD to go into that position? So if you're interested in government or industry jobs, maybe you only need a master's. But if you actually want to become a professor, then you're gonna need your PhD. You should also be thinking about, what do you hope to get out of grad school, or what can grad school offer you? So maybe there are certain transferable skills that you hope to get out of grad school, such as doing field work, practicing lab work, even public speaking or time management. Maybe you're going to make connections and meet other people in the field as a stepping stone to your long-term career goals. Or maybe you just want the degree. Maybe you just need your master's to get into the next job that you want to do. Or maybe you need your PhD if you really hope to become a professor. You should also be thinking about what excites you. So do you have a passion for learning or a passion for science? Maybe there are certain questions that just keep you up at night, or certain things that you just really want to figure out. Like, let's say you're really interested in deep sea mining, or you really love corals and coral reefs and want to do everything to prevent coral bleaching. Maybe you're really interested in that. I think it's important that you enjoy doing science and that you love learning new things. Love reading. Well, you don't have to love reading, but yeah, maybe you just really like school, really like taking these courses, learning more, challenging yourself. That could be a good reason to go to grad school. You should also be asking yourself if you're ready to conduct independent research almost completely on your own. You will have support from your advisor, but the project is basically going to be in your hands. So are you okay with that? Do you have experience working on a project in the past? Brainstorming questions and really just figuring out what your next step is, because your advisor is not always going to tell you what to do. They're not going to design your thesis or dissertation for you. You should also consider that grad school is a lot of reading and writing. Ask yourself how you feel about that. You don't necessarily have to love it, but you should at least tolerate it, because you're going to be doing a ton of it when you first arrive, catching yourself up on the literature, and then throughout. You're going to have to write a whole thesis and or dissertation. And the last thing, and very important thing that you should consider, is your financial situation, and is a salary of 20 to 35K doable for you? This grad student salary does vary depending on which university and which program that you're in, also depending which kind of funding you're getting. You're going to be making not a lot of money as if you were just in a regular 9-to-5 job probably, and you're going to be making roughly the same amount for 2 to 3 or 5 to 7 years. So I think it's important that you take that into consideration when applying to grad school. And it's also important to note the cost of living in your prospective school, because for example, at UH, I am making around 35K per year. However, I'm living in Hawaii, where the cost of living is crazy high compared to the amount of money us graduate students make. So yeah, I think that's really, really important to consider before entering a graduate program. All right, so now maybe you've thought, yes, graduate school is for me. How do I actually apply? Where do I begin? So the biggest difference between undergrad and graduate school is that in graduate school, you are applying to work with a professor. You're not just applying to the school. Undergrad, you can just apply to a school without talking to any professors, and that's fine, but that is not the case with grad school. In grad school, your admission depends on 1, how well you fit with a faculty member and their lab, and 2, funding. So faculty and funding are going to be the most important things when applying. So I mentioned this earlier, but as a grad student, you will be making anywhere from 20 to 35K as a salary or stipend, though these numbers do vary depending on which program you're applying to. So do this research as you're applying. This money to support your graduate student salary is either going to be coming from GA-ships, scholarships, or other fellowships. So GA-ships, or graduate assistantships, come in 2 forms. The first is a research assistant, which means that you come in on a faculty member's grant. They have money for you to do research, so you get paid just to do that research, which usually overlaps with your dissertation research. So for example, when I applied to UH, I came in on my advisor's research grant, which was a deep sea mining grant, which meant that I had to work on this deep sea mining project project, and my dissertation didn't actually have to be focused on deep sea mining, but it was in my best interest to have it overlap with deep sea mining, or to have that project be the samples that I'm actually going to use in my dissertation, if that makes sense, because this was a project where they had the money and the ship time to go out and collect samples, bring them back into lab, work them up, all paid for by that research grant. So I could have done something completely different, non-related to deep sea mining, but that's kind of how that happens. You can also get paid through a teaching assistantship, which means that you're paid by the university to do your research and your work, but you're also gonna have that additional teaching component. So I think it's about like 20 hours a week that you're gonna be spending toward teaching, and another 20 that you'll be spending toward your actual dissertation research. So you'll be doing both your research and teaching at the same time. And it's also really important to note that oftentimes teaching assistants are making less money than research assistants, even though they're doing more work. So that's something to consider. But as a teaching assistant, you also get the opportunity to teach undergrads, which is really important, especially if you want to become a professor in the future. So those are GA-ships, and the next kind of funding you can get are fellowships and scholarships, which can be through your school or external sources. So some examples in STEM are the NSF GRFP, which is a really big and really competitive one. If you get the GRFP, almost any professor is going to take you as long as you fit with their lab. So it looks really good if you get it, and you get an annual salary of $37K. Some other examples of scholarships and fellowships are the Ford Foundation Dr. Nancy Foster, which is especially relevant if you're doing marine related work, and the Fulbright. And I could do a separate video on funding or the NSF GRFP, since I applied to that in October 2021 and actually received it, which was super exciting. I wasn't expecting it at all. But if a video on either of those two topics would be useful or helpful to you guys, let me know in the comments and I can definitely do that. Okay, so we talked about the two key components, which are faculty member and funding. So before you start reaching out to faculty that you would like to do your master's or PhD with, it's a really good idea that you start thinking about which research topic or just general area that you want to study during your graduate program. So some professors are going to expect you to have specific research questions in mind, maybe a general understanding of how you can answer those research questions, but other professors just expect you to come in with a general research topic or idea that you'd like to pursue. Either way, here are some tips that can help you start thinking about which research topic would be most interesting for you. All right, so first you can start thinking about which broad research areas seem interesting to you and what can you see yourself studying for 2 to 3 to 5 to 7 years. So you can think back to your undergrad, or maybe you took a gap year. Think back to those experiences. Were there any courses, lectures, or readings that were interesting and really stood out to you? Or maybe there are some unanswered questions that you had. That could be a really good start when trying to refine your research topic. If you have research experience, you can start thinking about which methods that you used, that you have experience with, or maybe that you want to learn more about. You should think about whether or not you enjoy field work, lab work, or more computer computational modeling, something like that. And you should be honest with yourself about which you actually like, which you tolerate, and which you just like straight out avoid doing. It's likely that your thesis or dissertation project is going to include a combination of the three. However, you can tailor your topic to the methods that you really enjoy doing. And if you don't have much research experience, maybe there's certain methods that you found really interesting or you want to learn more about. So now hopefully you have a broad topic that you're potentially interested in. You can start refining it. And you can do this by looking into the literature. Google Scholar is really, really helpful, and it's also really helpful to sort by most recent, because you want to know what exciting research is happening now, not what was exciting way back when. And it's also helpful when reaching out to certain faculty members that those projects or papers that you read are recent, because it's possible that they did that research like 8 years ago, but they've moved on to something completely different now. So as you're sorting through the literature in Google Scholar, you can start taking notes on what you've read, writing down anything that you want clarification on, maybe certain things that would be interesting to you that you would want to do a project on. Usually in the discussion section of papers, there's like limitations of their study or future work that can be done. That's a really good section of the paper which will help you determine like next steps in this research. They'll tell you what would be interesting to do next. So yeah, just really start reading papers, and then all of these papers are gonna have authors. They tell you which universities each author is coming from, and you can start looking into those universities. Maybe you notice that a lot of, let's say, marine or oceanography research is being published by professors at University of Hawaii, maybe Miami, Scripps, or Duke University. You can kind of start getting an eye for where the research is happening. Then you can go to those university pages, look into the different departments that you're interested in applying to, look at the faculty members. Faculty usually have their own page, which tells you a little bit about their research in their lab. It could also have their CV attached, courses that they teach, and selected publications. Then from there, you can start visiting different lab pages at universities. Most professors and labs have their own website, which will tell you a little bit about the research they do in their lab, recent publications, and they'll also have a list of undergrads, grad students, or postdocs that are working in their lab currently or in the past. This is super helpful because you can also start reaching out to graduate students and ask them questions about maybe the research that you're interested in. Maybe they know someone that's doing similar research that would be a good fit for you to apply to. They can also tell you a little bit more about their own lab culture, their advisor, and advising style. At this point, you can also start talking to any other mentors that you might have, researchers at government facilities such as NOAA, other people that are doing this research. Oftentimes, I would recommend reaching out to professors once your ideas are a little bit more developed, because professors are really, really busy and they get tons of these emails each application round. So yeah, I think you want to hold off on reaching out to professors until you have a better understanding of the type of research you would want to do in grad school, because you want to really wow them with like all of the research and all of the reading you've done. You don't want to just go to them and ask them, which papers can I read, or who should I reach out to, or are you accepting graduate students this year, without any other context. Once your ideas are a little bit more developed and you've done a lot of the reading, identified the faculty members and the schools that you're most interested in, then you can start reaching out to those professors via email. And I'll make a whole other video. This will probably be the second video in this series about how exactly to email professors. Because like I said, professors receive tons of these emails every year. So if you don't start out with a really good email, they're just gonna trash it or not even open it. If you have any specific questions, leave them in the comments and I'll be making another video on that very, very soon. So after talking to graduate students, mentors, and other researchers, you can even ask them for connections if they know any other people in the field that may be a good fit for you to apply to, and ask them for an introduction, because you're way more likely to get a response from a professor if you say, I spoke to so-and-so and they told me to reach out to you, or just if you have a mutual contact. It shows that you've kind of done the work prior to reaching out to them. So now that you've done all of this work, all of this research, deciding if grad school is even for you, deciding between a master's or a PhD, identifying some faculty, the next step is going to be to actually apply, fill out the application form. In general, a graduate student application is going to consist of an online application or portal that's going to ask you for basic contact information, which department you want to apply to, maybe identifying certain faculty members at the school. You'll have to pay an application fee of $40 to $150. They can be pretty expensive depending on the school, but I know the more prestigious schools like Stanford and UCSD are a little bit more pricey. So you want to account for that when applying. You're also going to need 2 to 3 recommendation letters, usually from a professor, advisor, or mentor of some sort. A CV, which is a longer version of your resume that we use for science and academia. The next component is going to be a writing portion, so a personal statement or statement of purpose, also called statement of objectives or statement of intent. The names of these really vary depending on the program that you're applying to, and each have different things that they're looking for you to talk about. So it's really important that you know the difference between these before you actually do any writing. If it's interesting or useful to you, I can make a video later in this series on how to write those statement of purpose or statement of objectives, how to put together your CV and what should your CV include, and also how to ask for recommendation letters, or examples of what makes an outstanding letter of recommendation for grad school. The next component are test scores, which can be the GRE, standard test, or subject test. The GRE is $205, so it's really important to do the research on whether or not the school or schools that you're applying to require this GRE. And you also need to take it no later than November if you're applying for fall, in order to have the test scores back in time for your application. You'll also need transcripts. These could be official or unofficial transcripts depending on the school requirements. But yeah, do this research and also order transcripts early if you need them to be official transcripts from the school. And here's an example of a pretty good timeline that you can use as you prepare to apply to graduate schools. All right, that was just a general how to get into grad school video. If you guys have any more specific questions, I would love to help you with this process. So just leave a comment on this video or reach out to me on Instagram. I reply to all of my comments and all of my messages because I'm super grateful that you guys took the time to watch this video. And I also really want to help you get into grad school if that's something that you're interested in pursuing. I can also answer any questions about what my life is as a graduate student or what my day-to-day is like, especially as a graduate student in Hawaii. So if you're interested in seeing that, reach out to me, but you can also watch my PhD vlogs that will be up here somewhere. I made a video on my first week as a PhD student at Mānoa, and I've been releasing PhD vlogs kind of randomly ever since. Go watch them. And thank you guys so much. Peace.